And welcome back, everybody, to yet another edition of Going for Two, presented by Homefield Apparel. That's the official podcast of the Extra Points newsletter. I am your host, Matt Brown, publisher of said newsletter. I'm joined here by my colleague, co-host, and friend, Bryan Fischer. Bryan, it's been a hell of a week, huh?
It has been. Oh man, let me tell you, it has been a long week. And glad. The good news is, as we come up towards the end of it, it's a Super Bowl weekend. We had the last true football game of the season now, and a lot going on in college athletics, though.
Listen, it's a Super Bowl weekend that is one. The Bengals are in it. The Bengals are in it. The pride of Southern Ohio is in it. Like, I don't know what to think. I haven't been engaged with the NFL in like 5 years, but I was a diehard Bengals fan as a kid because the Browns moved away, and my parents told me not to root for the Browns. And now we have a Bengals team that's good, that's led by an Ohioan, and has Ohio State players in the secondary, and they're interesting. And I don't know what to do. I feel like my ability to engage with the sport will change if they suddenly win a Super Bowl. It'd be like the Lions being good.
That's an unimaginable to think the Lions would be good. But I tell you what, it's fascinating to see when you go through the Super Bowl week. There's always a ton of buildup, obviously, with 2 weeks leading into the game and so much focus on these two teams. And what I found interesting is always, how did these teams get there, and the two very different approaches that they took to get to the big game. And I think there's some lessons certainly from the college athletics sphere that they can kind of take away. Obviously, with the Browns or with the Bengals. You have a team that's very much a mom and pop shop in the NFL. This is
maybe the only one left.
Truly, I mean, truly a mom and pop shop. Very small scouting department. Obviously, you're talking about a coaching staff that is not anywhere near one of the larger organizations. So they very much do a lot of things in house. This is not a team that even sells their naming rights to their stadium, right? So very different approach to most of the conglomerates around the NFL. And then you have the Rams, who are obviously made the big splashy move to LA and have been continuing to chase after success. They've got the brand new stadium that they're playing at home this weekend. They have a lot going on in terms of what the Cronkies have brought to the table with the organization. They've traded draft picks away for big stars, which obviously has panned out because they're back in the game and favored to win a Super Bowl here. So just very different approaches to running your NFL team and building a college football, or building a football team that I think you can apply to having a college football team, which we're going to start to see probably more in the portal nowadays. With this era, you got a USC down the road, right? Bring in a bunch of big stars through the transfer portal, Lincoln Riley turning over that roster very quickly. Versus you have others, through the recruiting process with high schoolers and maybe more established coaches that have been there a long time, making sure that they had that development aspect, very much like the Bengals. So it's been two different approaches. They've each found success, and I would imagine that is going to play out quite a bit in college football, even though we're probably going to end up seeing the same teams there at the end of the day in the college football playoff.
Yeah, because in the college football and college basketball world, you can't decide to be a low revenue program and just draft a transformational quarterback and wide receiver and pick up some other people on the waiver wire the same way. But you're right. And honestly, that's one of the things about college athletics it's been interesting to me as a fan, because you have so many different levels of resource. You have schools that have different missions, different profiles, or different geographies. You can't build your program the same way. This week, I think we'll get a chance to maybe learn a little, or based on what happened this week, we'll get a chance to see another program that's going to have to build things in maybe a less traditional way. We had a new entrant into Division I. You may have missed this earlier. I'm looking at the other stories we haven't had a chance to really write or talk about, but the Ohio Valley Conference earlier this week announced a new member, the University of Southern Indiana Screaming Eagles, a longtime Division II, very quality basketball program, has announced that they're going to reclassify and join. And that's a big deal for anybody that is paying a lot of attention to one AAA realignment. Ohio Valley has been picked apart by a couple of other different leagues. They're right there on they still need to add other programs, especially programs that play FCS football, which Southern Indiana does not, if they want to retain their auto bid. But this could be the start of maybe a run of different teams deciding to join this league and give them a little bit more stability. Unlike maybe some other Division II institutions, you're bringing up an established winner some really good basketball facilities, better than a lot of other Division I institutions. And, coming from a state that knows a thing or two about basketball success.
You're right, and it's interesting, that point in particular, having those better facilities, because I think the move to D1 for Southern Indiana is going to put a lot of pressure on Evanstonville. They're obviously kind of co-located in the same town there, but
yeah.
You talk about kind of splitting dollars in a smaller market. Now that there's multiple D1 programs, kind of in town or kind of on the outskirts of town, that's going to be a fascinating thing to kind of keep an eye on. As the kind of up and comer has the bigger kind of attention put on it, as with that move to D1, what does that do for the local dollars? What does that do for sponsorships? Not just at the athletics level, but kind of go back through at the school level. How is that going to affect students? Kind of coming into that region, or maybe exiting that region. Are you going to stay home and go to Evanstonville or go somewhere else? I think that's going to be pretty interesting to see with this move. Is just kind of the second order effects that come from Southern Indiana moving up.
Yeah, I mean, Evansville's not that big of a city. It's, I don't know, it's a little bit more of 100,000 people. One's a public school, one's a private school. One's drawing, they're drawing the students from different places. Evansville has been one of the a couple of Missouri Valley Conference programs that's been struggling with enrollment. And that was part of the reason why the Missouri Valley was looking at adding other schools in more urban markets, not just to help recruit better basketball players to be a really good mid-major league, but to help recruit students. And now you have a different program coming in. I mean, I think it's great for the OVC. It is hard to, I think, establish expansion teams in college athletics, or bringing in a school that's really new, that doesn't have a tradition, that doesn't have engaged students, and hoping that you can build that over decades, like you did with UCF. That's very difficult to do. A lot of schools are trying to do that. If you already have a fan base, if you already know you're going to get 4,000 or 5,000 people to come to a game, and you know a little bit about what it takes to win in a league that's now, I mean, no disrespect to any of the other OVC basketball teams in there, with Murray and Belmont leaving, you can win that league. Like it's not like the Cleveland Cavaliers are playing in that league right now. This is a positive thing. Maybe not so positive looking a little bit down the road in the Midwest. This is a story I don't want to say too much about right now, because I am writing about it on Monday, and I've been on the phone about this a lot. But I assume, Brian, you've seen what's happening in my neck of the woods here in Chicago with UIC, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to kind of take a step back and say, just with this Friday podcast, we do want to kind of discuss some of the larger issues, going on that you may have seen on D1 Ticker, some of the top 10 stories. You'll get that list on Friday as well, probably after this podcast gets released. But some of the hot button topics really across college athletics has been like UIC, obviously related to the OVC, just schools kind of saying, you know what, you're headed out of this league. Absolutely not. You're not going to compete in our championships. And, really, I think the furor over this started way back when the CAA did it, with JMU leaving and all that. But it seems like it's kind of cascaded to pretty much anybody at the kind of FCS one AAA level, saying, you know what, we're going to skip you out on conference championship week. And that's affecting a lot of schools and a lot of conference athletes. And I think a lot of people are rightly up in arms about it, starting with UIC and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, so I do think it's fair to say that the norms around changing conferences have changed a little bit. It used to be, really not that long ago, anybody leaving and giving 6 months notice would be considered a major faux pas. Almost always you gave more than a year's notice. And part of that was because some of these conferences, particularly at the low and mid-major levels, would set their conference schedules for all sports like 3 years in advance. So anybody leaving, it becomes a gigantic logistical hurdle to redo everything. That's not as much the case now virtually everywhere. I've talked to folks here at UIC. I've talked to people at Stony Brook who are going through this. And even though we've seen an uptick in this behavior, it's still not the norm. I believe 18 leagues over the last year or two have changed membership. Only 3 of them have actually enforced this kind of rule, even though it's in the bylaws in a couple other places. It's the sort of thing that presidents don't have to enforce if they don't want to. And it's one thing if you're Texas and Oklahoma, where there's like $1 bajillion at stake with broadcast rights, and it makes sense that you would fight about that a little bit more. It's not the case in the Horizon League. Like there's not a ton of money. UIC men's basketball, they're the flagship sport of this league. I don't mean to disrespect anybody there. They're having a tough season. It's not like you really have to worry about them stealing a bid and walking out the door on the way out. You'll have to worry about that in some other sports, but not so much men's basketball. As best as I can tell, a lot of this is really being driven by spite. And with the Colonial, if we're being honest here, I saw that coming, and that was a league where, and I even reported this last year. Maybe not everybody got along all of the time, and there were some big personalities, and there were some hurt feelings about JMU's decision, even though everyone kind of knew what this was going to happen eventually. But that wasn't really the case, or at least not widely known to be the case with America East as a new commissioner, Horizon League as a relatively new commissioner. There's been changeover on the president's side for both of those. Like I can tell you, UIC was not expecting this. So you're going to hear more about it on Monday. Talk to a bunch of athletes. I'm trying to talk to a bunch of the presidents. If you're listening to this and maybe you want to explain why you think this is a good idea, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. But from my vantage point right now, based on the information that I have, it looks extremely small for anybody that professes to be in this industry for the benefit of college athletes, because like no one's really getting rich off of or getting generational wealth from Horizon League sports. If you're going to say like I'm in this to help college athletes, you can't defend what's happened the past week because the only people that are getting hurt are not the people that made those decisions. It's a bunch of swimmers who didn't know the Missouri Valley Conference from the Big West 2 weeks ago.
I mean, that is the biggest point that I take away from kind of the pettiness, as you said, is just that these same people that are turning around and voting this way to enforce this are going to go and say, well, we want to invest in our student athletes. We want to make sure that their experience is so great. And then they end up doing this to other institutions' athletes. And I think that's where a lot of the anger, a lot of the furor kind of comes around, especially on short notice when you get a lot of these athletes that, they have no control over where their school is going to or why they're leaving. They just want to compete. And now they're left without an opportunity. And honestly, I think it gives more of a headache, for the Horizon League and the CAA and everybody else. Just knowing that you kind of got to replace these teams, you got to deal with missing buys and missing inventory. If you're dealing with that with TV, and so it's like, just why are you taking on this extra headache? I understand you're upset that the schools are leaving, but you know what? That is just life now in college athletics. Schools are going to leave.
Yeah. Who in the Horizon League wouldn't have taken that a chance to go to the Missouri Valley? And maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more next week. Maybe some of those other teams on the Horizon tried to join the Missouri Valley and would have done the exact same thing had the opportunity present itself. It's not like low major and mid major realignment happens on a timeline that allows you to give 18 months notice, right? Nobody knew what the Missouri Valley was going to need anybody new in January. These things happen relatively quickly.
And because there's such a small pool of candidates that you have to recruit to replace them, is that going to give the new membership coming in who maybe might be deciding between your league and another, does that give them a little bit of a pause to say, I really want to join a league that has these quote unquote shared values, but they're not really shared value with us because we're coming in and we do value that student athlete experience. And you know what? This conference is proving by their actions that they're really not. And so I think that's part of it.
I can tell you reported, like not just me speculating. I could tell you because people have told me this, that matters. It's mattered for other leagues that are looking to add somebody because right now, like 8 friggin' Division I conferences are hunting for membership. And when you're in a league like the Horizon or the Southland or the ASUN where people don't have unlimited budgets, you're right. There's like 8 schools max, Division I or Division II, that fit that geographic footprint and like have the baseline amount of money. Just like I know it's been a while, I think, since either of us have dated, but if you went on a first date with somebody and they spent a lot of that time talking about how crazy all of their exes were and breaking down how their previous relationships ended poorly, at the end of that date, would you be as excited about going on a second one? Like that would raise a red flag for me, Yeah, and it's a similar. I mean, it's not. That's not a perfect analogy, but it's a similar line of thinking here. You don't necessarily join a conference envisioning how you're going to leave it, but if you can see how, hey, this is what happens when there's an emotional disagreement, that could happen to me at some point. I can't predict the future.
And I think it's just kind of reinforces too that there is so much more movement upcoming, kind of at the lower levels because of really everything going on in Division One and the upcoming transformation with that. I know a lot of folks are concerned about money, obviously, and that's a driver in a lot of these decisions. But I think it's also in terms of can you get those schools that are like minded in the same region? I think a little bit more realignment in terms of the actual geographic locations is helpful for a lot of these leagues as well. To save on travel costs, make sure that you are kind of recruiting from the same school of students. So I think there's a lot going on at the lower levels, and then this is just kind of one of the big red flags I think that you're going to see, and hopefully is not repeated. You don't see anything like this at the FBS level, and there's a reason for that. I would think that eventually some of these conferences, maybe they understand the heat that they're getting, the feedback they're getting from alumni, from fans, from donors, from their fellow school presidents will ultimately cause them to kind of change their mind. But we'll see in the short term, because it's introducing a lot of headaches and a lot of furor around, I think, college athletics, even from people that are not connected to the Horizon League or not connected to schools like UIC. They're upset for them, and I think that's going to continue.
Well, I mean, you did touch on something I think that's important. I think you're right. We haven't seen a situation exactly like this play out at the FBS level, but let's be very clear about something, because if there's one lesson we've learned from the past couple of days, by God, it's that anger and pettiness and small-mindedness and plain old provincial stupidness is not a domain limited to mid-majors. Bryan, can you tell me what the hell's been going on at Auburn?
Well, I mean, the most fascinating situation imaginable, right, with Auburn going on now is you have Bryan Harsin being staked out at the airport. You have Bryan Harsin being staked out outside SEC meetings. Let
me very quickly interrupt you. Just for the listener, we are recording this Thursday afternoon. So the answer to the question, what the hell is happening at Auburn, by the time you listen to this, could theoretically be different. Let's that context. Please continue. You're right. The man was being staked out at the airport, or the coaches meeting today. Why was he being staked out?
Only in the SEC, right? Does that end up happening, right? When a coach is under fire and you have statements being issued by school leadership, you have random general policies being enacted about cooperating with investigations popping up on school websites. Magically the day the coach returns from vacation. I mean, it is all just a heap of trouble, for Bryan Harsin and Auburn as they try to sort things out. Obviously, there is a wide expectation that eventually he's going to get fired. The whole question, I think, surrounding the whole situation is how much money is he going to end up being paid? Is it going to be for cause? Is it for not? But this is just another long drama that's being played out in real time in the SEC that I think everybody understands where the logical conclusion is going to be. But the road to get there is fascinating and filled with twists and turns, as we saw this week.
Yeah, help me here, and please, interrupt me or drag me back here if I'm off course. But because SEC booster is not my first language, and so I'm trying to kind of read in between and what I'm seeing here. But if my assumptions are correct, this Mr. Harsin, not a great fit at Auburn for several different reasons: cultural, talent acquisition, recruiting. Was walking into a situation where he wasn't the first, second, or third choice from some of the money or political power behind the school. His athletic director is not somebody who's seen as likely to be there for the next 20 years, or someone who could kind of absorb all of those issues. You can get through those sort of things if you win, and Auburn wins 6 and 7. Maybe he wasn't the most congenial guy at the country club. Then you have an exodus in the transfer portal and also with coaches. And then you have some message boardy kind of rumors about impropriety that would allow an athletic department to fire somebody for cause. And so then there's a gigantic investigation. They're interviewing dozens and dozens of people. And my read on this is, after you've done those interviews and you've brought in the president of the university and you've done this gigantic thing, and you don't have the goods to immediately fire the guy for cause, those goods might not be there. And so I could not blame Harsin for saying, I'm going to stay in Mexico, and if you want to fire me, you have to owe me my entire buyout, which is a lot of money. And now, we're playing out the string, because you can't really go into next season, particularly and this is like my friend Richard Johnson at Sports Illustrated pointed this out to me. There's an amazing recruiting class in the state of Alabama this year, like way more top 100, caliber kids, not just 4 stars, but high 4 stars. So you can't go into this year in this hyper competitive world with a coach who has no friends, who has no administrative or political support, and isn't that great of a recruiter. But now you're trying to figure out how to not cut the check. And the longer this goes on, the dumber it becomes. Do I have to gist of this right? As this just like the world's dumbest soap opera where we all know the ending, but we need to wait for something very stupid to happen before we get there?
Well, that doesn't sum it up. I don't know what does, but I mean,
More damn legal, baby.
The fact is, this started basically from his hiring. This is a struggle between the Auburn boosters and really the athletic department led by AD Allen Green has been going on for a while, and kind of sitting on the backdrop to what has been happening on the field with the Tigers. And look, it was not a great season. I think everybody kind of expected that with coaching transition, obviously a lot of roster turnover. It was not expected to be kind of the greatest Auburn season ever, but a lot of people expected better than, kind of the 500 record that they were hovering around for most of the year. Right. And that just kind of exacerbated all the issues there is the on-field product was not great. The recruiting was not going great, especially in his first full recruiting class. You would expect being Auburn, having that history of success, you could recruit a lot of great athletes, going to Georgia, going to Florida, going, certainly your backyard in Alabama there, going to Louisiana occasionally. You have a great talent base there, and you expect the recruiting to kind of be up there amongst your SEC peers, right? You're battling the number 1 class in Texas A&M in the West. You're battling Georgia on a yearly basis. You're battling Alabama, and obviously seeing those 3 classes up at the top of just about every recruiting ranking, and you're sitting down there, kind of middle of the pack for the SEC. That's tough to stomach for a lot of Auburn boosters. And that just kind of added 2 things where it kind of came to a head on kind of the week of signing day, saying, you know what, we're going to get left behind. And if we keep Bryan Harsin in charge, and I think that's, there's a lot else going on between those power struggles between the boosters and ultimately who hired, Bryan Harsin. But you throw in a presidential change where a lot of boosters are trying to kind of reassert themselves in terms of control of the university. Yep. That new president search conveniently just got wrapped up with a board meeting this past week. So there's a new president coming in, in May, I believe it is. So it's like there's a whole lot going on and a whole lot of chaos between power struggles, between a very hands-on booster culture at Auburn. And
yes, that is definitely one way you could phrase it. It is hands-on and it's engaged.
Engaged, yes, that is definitely what the word I would definitely use. And so you add all that together with what is kind of going on in terms of the general football program, set against the backdrop of a school that is doing so much successfully on the athletics front.
They're doing they're the best men's basketball team, or one of the 5 best teams in men's basketball. Yeah, in
line for a number 1 seed in basketball. You have Sunisa Lee, a gold medalist running the gymnastics program, which is obviously a huge deal at Auburn. Kind of beyond having a gold medalist, doing the floor routine or whatnot for you. Like that they love that sport down there. Take it real seriously. You have baseball coming up, softball coming up. You have some of those other sports that Auburn folks really enjoy, watching in terms of the Olympic sports, and set against the backdrop of a football team. Really, the one thing that has not gotten a lot of success lately, but that's what a lot of those boosters care about. Obviously, it is the focal point of their Saturdays, and not just their falls, but their entire school calendar. 365, and so it's a fascinating situation to watch, and it leads to us kind of camping outside of SEC winter meetings. As coaches roll up into cars and get out and not say anything at all. But it's been a fascinating look at how things kind of play out in front of you, and when a school does not have their ducks all lined up in a row, ready to go, things like this can happen.
I feel like we were just talking about this before we got on the air, that maybe in the next week or 2, whenever this has reached some sort of resolution in some capacity, maybe we should do an Auburn Explained, given that it is on fire in a way that is similar, but also very distinctly different from Louisville.
I mean, you mentioned Louisville, but like Auburn, it takes things to an entirely different level. I mean, go back to when they tried to hire Bobby Petrino back in the day, and they're sending jets and like their fans kept out at the airport. And I mean, how many other boosters and would like just kind of off the top of your head from the SEC that you can instantly kind of conjure other than like Auburn's Bobby Louder. That's a name like a lot of people would know that, and maybe just in passing if you're a college football fan of the last couple of years. And that only happens at Auburn. Like, are you really knowing some of the real down into details boosters there at Alabama or Texas, or well, maybe Texas is a bad idea just
Texas and Louisville maybe, but no, it's a good point. I went to Ohio State, and I can name 2 or 3 gigantic university boosters. One of them was Les Wexner, who should be or might be or could be in federal prison. And there's the Schottensteins, and then that's about it. Like the kinds of people that give the school $400,000 with the athletic department on the regular basis, they're not the kinds of people that you just know in Columbus.
Well, the same just in that region. Are you hearing a ton about Florida boosters right now? Are you hearing a ton about the Georgia boosters right now? No, you don't have those kind of names off the top of your mind that other than the place at Auburn. And
yeah, they're more professional about it. So and people need to know who they are.
The wild thing to me too is just how much they've been able to overcome this lack of alignment to have so much success in football. They've played for national titles, they've won national titles, and really they haven't had maybe true alignment from the president to the AD to the head coach since Pat died, maybe like that era. That's how far you kind of have to go back into the early 90s.
Yeah,
that is the most amazing thing about Auburn is just they've had a lot of success in spite of what they've been able to do, and in spite of all the off-field fighting that's gone on with the boosters in the athletic department.
I'd like to manifest something here real quick. I think I have a solution to this problem, because what Auburn needs is a man to be able to step in there who has credibility among all factions of this program, all factions in their community, someone who could step in there and, quite frankly, also unite the country. Somebody who nationwide America would be very excited to come back to see in that spot. It's time to bring back Tommy Tuberville. Let's do it. We need some 6-4, 6-2 kind of games. We'll have another special election, and we'll bring somebody else in to take his Senate seat.
I am honestly surprised that he has not been asked about the situation at Auburn. Maybe that's just the disconnect between those in DC and what's kind of occurring in the state. But man, I really want some political reporter to go ask Senator Tubbs, what are your thoughts going on at Auburn?
Yeah, tell me. Honestly, that's a great idea, and I would do that if his office didn't follow me on Twitter and have seen some of the things that I've said about him. I will say, like, I have made it an honest to God goal to be less explicitly partisan on Twitter, because no one likes being lectured to, and it limits the audience for the stuff I'm trying to do otherwise. But I will never stop making fun of him. And that it will probably have to be somebody else that gets the good football quote out of that guy. I'm going to tell you something though. We've talked a lot at the beginning of this show about dumpster fires, places where there's a lot of bad feelings and anger and frustration, and things change all the time. Let me tell you all real quickly about a story that will make you feel happy, content, maybe warm and soft and snuggly. That's right, folks. I'm talking about Homefield Apparel, the title sponsor of this podcast, the maker of extremely soft and comfortable t-shirts and sweatpants and hoodies with your favorite official licensed collegiate logos that are conversation pieces that are not just functional, but really tie your entire wardrobe together. Today, like most days, when I'm not required to wear a suit, I'm wearing a Homefield t-shirt. I'm wearing Blaster, the mascot for the Colorado School of Mines. We've got, is that Butler?
That's the Butler Bulldog. Yes, it is.
That's a good dog. That's a good dog. And this is probably a good, I don't think this one has the dynamite. I'm sure he's a good donkey. I've never been to the Colorado School of Mines. I've never been to Colorado, actually. But it's a great shirt, and it's a donkey that sometimes has a stick of dynamite in it, which is exactly the kind of thing that I want to associate, not just with my corporate self, but myself as a human being. Brad, do you remember who Homefield's adding this week?
I believe that it would be NC State, which I am excited to watch. I see the entire collection, because just seeing the bits and pieces that I have, I'm excited, and it's one reason why I've kind of delayed another order is to see what's going on this weekend. Yeah,
this is, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think it's NC State's biggest win in 20 years to finally get added to Homefield.
Yeah, my good friend Bill Brinson at CBS Sports, huge. He's covering the Super Bowl this weekend. He was actually on the Homefield. They did an audio thing on Thursday, but I know he's going to be trying to prepare for the game and all excited, but I just know he's going to drop $500 on this collection. On
yeah, the only reason I have not ordered any for this is because I know what some of the schools are coming next, and the latest bag has not dropped for this podcast, and so I need to I'm sure this is great. It's gonna have the horny cartoon wolf on everything, which of course is what everybody needs on all of their clothes. But there are some absolute bangers coming, particularly if you're maybe in my part of the country, maybe a program or two you might be very interested in. So if you're an NC State fan, or you want to give a gift for an NC State fan in your life, or a South Carolina fan, or a Gonzaga fan, or a Cincinnati fan, or a Colorado School of Mines fan, you can go over to homefieldapparel.com and get your stuff, and then use promo code extra points. Because if you're one of like the 6 weirdos on the internet that loves our kind of show but doesn't have any home field stuff yet, you use that code, you can save 15% off your first order. You get that same stuff sent to you cheaper. It's a pretty good deal, right?
Absolutely. It's a great deal. It's such a good deal that a few of my wife's coworkers has been seeing her walk into the office with some of the home field stuff that she has stolen, and they went in on it. So I said, make sure you use that promo code, get 15% off your order, because it is not only a lifesaver in terms of saving yourself a little bit of dough when that order sheet kind of starts racking up, but you're going to end up going back and for more, because the collections continue to expand. And even if you're not a fan of a particular school, the logos are just so dang that you're going to want some more.
Yeah. So look, I'll be honest. I shouldn't say this, but we're happy to talk about your product or your program or or is it what you would like to advertise here. Just shoot an email to sales at extrapointsmb.com, and I'd be happy to send you a rate card. But this is something I'm more than happy to shill, even if they weren't giving me money, because they've been such good friends with for me and for many of my colleagues. And they make really good stuff. So it is from the heart, not just because there was a contract involved. It's important to use that extra code, that offer code, and try to save a little bit of money, because I think you also noted this week too, Bryan. All the athletic department budgets are coming in, and it looks like most people, as we all expected, did not make nearly as much money as they normally would have last year. I can't possibly imagine why, but maybe we're all trying to clip a couple coupons right now.
Shocking, right? That as we kind of come out of the pandemic, and look, it's important to kind of go back for those who maybe are not aware of how the finances work with college athletics. A lot of it's done on the fiscal year, right. July to July. So it's like basically your full season, kind of worth of accounting, which obviously kind of clips kind of 2 parts of the pandemic, and really when those restrictions for fan tickets and all that are kind of on both ends. So a lot of people, in the red. Obviously, the thing that catches my eye when seeing these numbers, and there's a lot of tough times, a lot of jobs were lost, a lot of tough decisions were made for a lot of these athletic departments, was just how much were these schools really providing some support, whether it's loans, whether it's truly direct institutional support, student fees and whatnot, that were given over to the athletic departments, and that's something you're still going to have to sort out as we kind of get through these FRS reports, and you can even catch a database, I believe, at Extra Points as well.
That's right. So last couple of fiscal years, we've gotten almost everybody on there. This year, in an effort to both make the site a little bit easier to navigate and also cut back on the amount of time, like data entry time I have to do. The fiscal year 21 FRS reports are in a big Google Drive. I'll throw in a link in the show notes, but you can find that at extrapointsmb.com. We have, I think, about 70 of them. We have most of the Power 5, and I'm working on tracking down a couple of low majors. Hey, if you're a compliance or an athletic department person listening to this, you could save me the trouble of filing a FOIA and just send it to me. It's not like we're here to embarrass you. I maintain that database primarily to help graduate students and academics conduct research. And it is Bryan, your point is definitely well met. Looking to these reports, you can definitely see a lot of schools that got significant amounts of money listed as direct institutional support. Some of that was couldn't sell tickets. Money had to come from somewhere. Because even when you can't sell tickets, many of your athletic department costs are still fixed. You still got to pay the proverbial mortgage on the facilities you built 7 years ago. You didn't really fire the coaches. You didn't fire the athletic trainers. You may not have to spend as much money on buses, but a lot of the other staff and the facilities and everything, you have to pay either way. So if the money's not coming in, You have to get it from somewhere. I do think it's important as people look through these reports, which they should. They're useful, important documents. They are the closest thing that we have to apples athletic department comparisons. But as my friend Katie Davis, who's a CPA that's helped out Extra Points and helped out D1 Ticker a lot, breaking these things down, just because they're the closest thing to apples and apples doesn't make them apples to apples. I think the term Katie likes to use is they're really apples to rocket ships. One reason for that is the phrase direct institutional support can mean a bunch of different things. It might mean, Brian, I guess you alluded to, literally the university's, central office cutting a check or forgiving a loan, like we saw with Cal, for example, right? I believe this happened with Arizona State. It might mean student fees. It might mean that some of the facilities or fixed, like the cost of the electricity in the locker room, maybe that came from central office rather than because it's than the athletic department. Sometimes it isn't money at all. Sometimes it's completely paper money that comes from the licensing, from some stuff that's sold in the university bookstore, or the price difference between an athletic scholarship who's in state versus out of state. And there's no way of knowing for sure unless you called somebody up and asked. And maybe they don't even know. So I think these are important to look at. We can do some very broad storylines. And you're right. This was a hard year financially for a lot of schools, but to get really granular into it requires more than just the report, but we still want to have the report. Does that make sense?
I mean, even in non-pandemic years, there's fuzzy math going on, as they like to term it. You can make things appear how you want a lot of times with college athletics finances. I mean, let's face it. Yep. Look at scholarship costs, right? A lot of schools account for those scholarships coming from the athletics fund being sent to the university. Well, guess what? A lot of that ends up coming back to the athletic department from direct institutional support, student fees, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a little bit of a circular money tree kind of going on there. You can change donations and obviously you have certain endowment things that end up, applying to coaching staff positions and coaching staff salaries. Like there's a whole host of things that are going on surrounding athletic department finances. Really makes for fascinating reading, as you mentioned, talking with folks about what they end up doing at their schools. And the fact of the matter is, every school does things differently. You would think there would be some standardization practices kind of going on across, the entire Pac-12 or the entire SEC or.
Nope. That's not how this industry works for most things. Nobody likes those eggheads from Berkeley telling us how to run our campus. Not here in Arizona. No, you're right. It is.
And if you've worked on a campus too, you know that things might be different from what happens in your department compared to the building right across the street, right? They might do accounting entirely different. And that's just kind of the fact of life now at universities. And there are some apples to apples comparisons that you can make. You can certainly take some of the broader numbers and kind of take a look at how healthy are these athletic departments. But the bottom line is it's such a unique industry because a lot of times, if you're short $20 million, guess what? You can go out to a booster and they can write a check and that $20 million hole is suddenly taken care of. Maybe less so this past year with all the pandemic stuff where you're simply short, $50, $60 million in the case of some of these Power 5 programs in terms of ticket sales.
Yeah.
That's a hole that you're not going to get back. And that's why there has been some schools that have provided that support to athletic departments. Iowa, comes to mind as well as one of the schools that did end up kind of taking care of that athletic department. But it's just kind of fascinating to see some of those little kind of details that come out of these reports. Like Arizona State getting some $60+ million from their school, and why did they do that? They refinanced some loans, with lower interest rates, and that's how they kind of came up with the money, which is kind of fascinating to kind of think about from a larger picture standpoint.
I want to say Arkansas ended up doing something like that too. I can tell you that Andy Witry and I honestly probably mostly Andy are going through the reports that we have to tease out maybe some different insights beyond just the pandemic. One of the cool things about these reports that they do tell you, they break down fundraising numbers and endowment scholarship numbers by sport. So you can get an idea for who is cutting a check specifically to the track team. And one of the things we're hoping to do is to get an idea for who are the random rich track teams, or who are the Olympic sport programs that do a really good job doing external development versus the ones that don't and have to rely, because some people just write a check to the athletic department, right? But others are adamant, even after I die, I will haunt you if you do anything to William and Mary Gymnastics. and other people don't. So those are one of the things we're trying to figure out. We're doing some stuff with coaching contracts that our directory is going to be updated about every day. About every other day, I filed a request for everyone that will let me, and we'll keep sharing that. Was that all the big stuff we had here from this week, beyond all the other things that we ended up writing and doing on Connect and publishing every other day?
Well, I think there's a lot coming on Connect. Like you mentioned, we're talking with, we have just had an interview in terms of softball and some of the bigger storylines with that sport starting up this week. Baseball starting up next week, and talking with Kendall Rogers at D1 baseball. So a lot going on with that. You're speaking of school presidents. We got ADs on. We've got people getting hired left and right. Talking with about their gigs and what they are doing in their new roles, how they're hiring people. Just had our first institutional client with that signed up for Collegiate Sports Connect at USC. So a lot going on that side of the business. And then, like I said at the top, D1 Ticker every Friday we'll put out our list of kind of the top 10 most read stories on those newsletters for the prior week. And it's always insightful because a lot of stories like that we've just been talking about, other administrators, other media members, other fans, are interested in seeing more about it. And I think that's why not only do they subscribe to the D1 Ticker, but they come here to this podcast to get some insight from you and me.
That's right. I feel like you and I make so much stuff. There's 5 of these newsletters. There's 2 of these podcasts. There's a bunch of stuff on Connect, but so much happens because there's just so many dang schools. We can't necessarily devote all the energy to every single thing. So I would definitely recommend for all of you. One, D1 Ticker is free. It is one of the few emails that I open up every single time, and I did that well before they became my employer, just because it's the best clipping service. If there is something that happened in a small market, I wouldn't find out about it from Twitter. I would find out about it from the Ticker. So I would encourage you to go to D1 Ticker and subscribe if you're not there already. I will add a couple of some of the Connect videos in our show notes when this goes up on Friday. I talked with one of our friends, Extra Point reader, law professor at Boise State, who helped kind of explain the National Labor Relations Board complaint out of California, which we didn't even talk about, which is a pretty massive story. I have another video from this week about roster management in the transfer portal and college hockey, which is a world that I didn't really know a whole lot about. So I talked to folks at the Rochester Institute of Technology. I am also speaking to President Casey at Colgate. We'll see if that gets in the show notes there or not, but if not, you'll be able to find it on Connect. That's also free. I'll throw in a link to Collegiate Sports Connect in the show notes as well. Last note, in case any of you are listening here would be interested, I am hitting the road next week. I'm going to Phoenix. I'm going to be in Phoenix for probably 72 hours. I'm writing about a certain athletic department out there. But if you're in the neighborhood, you want to come say hello or want me to come swing by, drop me a note. I'm at matt@extrapointsmb.com. I am very excited to get some vitamin D. I have not seen the sun in 9 days, and it sucks. So, I plan to be a serious professional journalist. I'm going to see a college baseball game. I'm also going to get in and out, and I'm going to be in the sun for a little while. It's going to be pretty great.
Soak it up, my friend. Soak it up.
That's right. My friends. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks. If you enjoy the show, send us nice things about us on whatever podcast platform of your choice. Buy some Homefield stuff, 5 stars. None of that 3-star best kicker crap. 5 or nothing. Nice things only. Good vibes only. Apple, Spotify, subscribe to Extra Points, extrapointsmb.com, and clothe your children in clothes from Homefield Apparel. That way we can pay our mortgages. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch up with you on the internet next week.